this is Kat Klingon-Smith with Retro Crime. Once again, I found a great story. Well, not great, interesting at least. And it's near Pittsburgh. There's a reason for this. I enjoy seeing places related to the crimes. It helps me realize that these people were human beings. It helps me research better, and I feel like I can help the audience relate better to them in that regard. So it's easier to do if it's within a couple hours of where I live, because I have small kids and not a whole lot of babysitters. But we are going to South Carolina soon. We are going to Kentucky next month. So I will have some great stories, and crime has always been fascinating. It has always been everywhere. I'm interested in seeing what we can find out there. Today's episode doesn't involve a murder, but it's still kind of unpleasant. I don't think I've ever sided with a bigamist before. I didn't even know that it was possible to side with one. Frankly, I can barely handle one husband. I learned how to gamble on football so that I had a vested interest because my husband loves football, and all these car trips we went on to go visit these sites. Oh boy, get him started on football. It was a long ride. They say, bet what you can afford. Jason said I'm the only one who ever cried over losing a $2.50 bet. Now, I am a huge fan of the Detroit Lions. My husband grew up in the fandom, and it's a hard fandom to be a part of. They had some hard years. My husband, I would see his heart broken so many times. Now, they're Super Bowl contenders, and he's a fan. But I'm at the point where I painted our living room Honolulu blue to match their uniforms when they're on TV. That is how much work marriage takes. That's how invested one has to be. So, 2 of those? No way. I mean, what if the next one likes baseball? I just don't have that kind of time and energy. This episode starts in Imperial Russia in the 1800s. A woman named Rachael Kirsch was born in 1839 to wealthy parents. I was able to piece together enough information from the local papers to pinpoint where in that massive country she was from. I believe it was Durban in the Dagestan region of Russia. They said she was from a village on the Caspian Sea and spoke a dialect of Hebrew that couldn't be understood by Hebrew interpreters. This narrows it down to likely being from the mountain Jews of the oh gosh, this one's always a doozy for me to say. I want to say Caucasus or something. Caucasus Mountains. They're Caucasus Mountains. It took me a minute. They're descendants of the exiled Persian tribes of Iran. Over time, they moved their settlement from the mountains to the sea. Of course, I can't blame them. Durban is the southernmost city in Russia and on the beautiful Caspian Sea. Their language is called Juri, which derives from Persian, which explains why the Hebrew interpreters were stumped. Despite the long-standing anti-Semitism in Imperial Russia, mountain Jews were allowed to own land for farming and ended up making far more money than the government expected. So when Rachel's parents died when she was 25, they were able to leave her a pretty large inheritance. But you can't buy love. Around 35 years old, she became lonely for companionship. She took in a foster child, a 10-year-old orphaned boy named Asher Markowitz. Well, Rachael was 19th century Woody Allen. She claimed they fell in love, so they married when he turned 19. She became Rachael Markowitz. According to Rachael, they had over a year of wedded bliss. Then Asher turned angry and violent one day, punched a mirror, and ran away. She found out where he was going and booked a trip on the same ship to New York. When he discovered that she was on the boat with him, he was furious and threatened several times to throw her overboard. To her luck, and not his, he became violently ill. They arrived in the United States in 1883, and she continued taking care of him in New York. His health improved until he was spry enough to steal $450 and her jewelry. Just the cash alone is worth over $10,000 today. Back then, it was enough to start a new life. Rachael had a sister in New York, and together they searched for him. Rachael returned home, and throughout the following 10 years, returned 2 more times to the United States to look for her estranged husband. On her 3rd trip in 1893, a friend in New York happened to have an acquaintance who lived in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, named Addison Brown. Addison had once confessed that his real name was Asher Markowitz, except it couldn't be the same person because this Asher Markowitz was married with a child. Addison Brown had made a good life for himself in Canonsburg. He took out large ads in the local paper for his tailoring business and became successful. Within 4 years of being in the United States, he met a local divorced woman named Jenny, who was fortunately only 4 years older than he was. He became the stepfather to her little boy named Harrison, and in 1883, he and Jenny were expecting their first child together. Rachael was determined to get him back. In Pittsburgh, she formally accused him of desertion and produced a marriage certificate along with depositions by 2 people who had been at the wedding and were now living in New York. This is where the interpreters needed to come in. When Addison was arrested, he was surprised and said that, yeah, she had been his foster mother, but nothing more. His wife was due to give birth any minute, so he requested that he be moved from Pittsburgh to Canonsburg so that he could get a bondsman. At first, he was denied, and it was speculated that he would be charged with bigamy also. Rachael gave a sob story about how she just wanted her husband's love and affection back. She was only 45, yet the press described her as an elderly woman, short and stout, with a German face. I lived in Germany, and I can honestly say that I have no idea what that means. I can't even tell if it's a compliment or an insult. Then the tides turned on Rachael and started not going her way. A judge ruled that the case needed to be moved to Washington County, where Canonsburg was. When Rachael finally got it through her head that they weren't meant to be, she relented and said that she settled the case for $50. Addison refused. Rachael finally agreed to a divorce and moved to Brooklyn to be near her family. She died in 1908 at 68 years old. Addison and his wife had a boy, then a girl. Their son, also named Addison, worked in a mill and died of heat exhaustion at 26 years old. Addison Sr. died of stomach cancer at 57. His wife died a couple years later of heart trouble. In my opinion, Addison did well for himself despite being orphaned at 10 and then sexually abused by his foster mother. Her behavior is now recognized as incest. She was a maternal figure, raising him since he was 10 and 25 years older. Just because a kid turns 18, it doesn't mean that they don't need parents anymore. My teenagers are 16 and 18, and I have no intention of not taking care of them ever. Obviously, their needs are changing as they mature, but they will always need us as rocks of unconditional love and support. Kids need that foundation as they develop independence. And as much as they may deny this, they also need the security of knowing that their parents are, I will say delicately, first among equals. No one likes the word authority. But there's an order here. There's a hierarchy. And at the top are the caretakers. Whether that be biological parents, step-parents, adopted parents, foster parents, etc. Deviating from that order is called betrayal, and it's the kind of betrayal that causes trauma, even to the point of post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what Rachael did. She betrayed her son. She traumatized him. She was his only parent, and she was lonely. With her parents gone, she found someone else to meet her need for companionship. He was seemingly willing. We've heard in prior episodes about the vile things people can be capable of when they're desperate enough. When a person can't tolerate not being in a relationship, then they're doomed to dysfunctional ones. But Asher was tough. He grew up and had enough. It takes courage to leave an abuser. He walked away with nothing, and normally I'm not a fan of stealing others' money, but if he needed it to leave an abusive partner and start fresh under a new identity, I call that asshole tax. He left with his only support in the world being the person he was escaping. It took hard work and intelligence to build a life from scratch, especially when he arrived in a country that was halfway around the world from his homeland and not only couldn't speak English, but almost no one spoke his dialect. As he was growing into Addison, he met another misfit, a young divorced single mother. That was pretty scandalous at the time. The boy he became a father to was 10 years old, the same age that he had been when Rachael became his foster mother. Too many people abuse kids because they were abused themselves. Most often, it's an attempt to heal by taking the power back that was taken from them. People aren't great at healing when they haven't seen or been taught how. Addison wasn't a destroyer, though. He was a survivor. He was loved by his parents for 10 years, and love built a strong foundation in us. As far as Rachael, instead of replacing her parents with inappropriate choices, she found her family in New York and lived out the rest of her days single, receiving the love and affection she sought from them. Sometimes the love we need is vastly different from the love that we want.